All right, I assume we're okay. All right, hey, good morning, everyone. Yeah, thank you for the next edition. If you have seen my work, this is a continuing discussion from, versus the previous presentations on whether Bitcoin has topped. We're starting to see signs of that. If you would like a copy of this presentation, you can go ahead and photograph or take a shot of the right QR code. You can also email info@lewavetrader.net. And then also, if you're interested in my work and continuing to catch it on a daily basis, you can subscribe or you can click the link on the left side, and we'll give 2 weeks free trials. I'll give you a second to do that, and then I'll jump on in. And then when we go to Q&A, assuming we have time, I'll head back here so you can get it as I'm taking questions. All right. I'm going to go through, the one thing, so before we jump into what I've done, and here's just a few of the calls. I don't want to go through all of them, but if you look at the last one, I was looking for a top at 125K. And if you've seen my work through my 8 years in the money show, I started illustrating that or discussing that target around 2021. And if you're really aware of what Bitcoin has been doing, we have topped at 124,500. I think that's pretty good for government work, so to speak, how the phrase goes. And now the question is, with us dropping off that top, have we actually put in a long-term top? Just disclosures. First of all, disclaimers. Everything I say here is not advice. I mean, even though I am personally of the perspective that Bitcoin is topped, I'm holding a certain amount of Bitcoin in my personal portfolio. Doesn't mean that's right for you. Again, I'm not suggesting any specific tactics. I'm not even suggesting that you invest in cryptocurrencies. Do your own research, get comfortable with the asset class before you do it. It is an incredibly volatile asset class. But take the presentation here as analysis only. Most of my work is based off the Elliott wave theory. You guys that have seen me in many presentations know that. It's a 100-year-old theory that suggests that trends move in 5 waves, correct in 3. But what's more important about the theory is that these wave patterns each wave segments have mathematical relationships one to another, and that's what gives us the ability to indicate pivot points, whether it be supports, resistance, or targets. They don't always hold. We simply observe the market when it hits one of our regions. We're fallible humans. We can get the wave counts wrong, for example, but there are areas that we watch the market for reaction and potentially take trades if that reaction that we expect occurs. So what's the goals here? I want to warn you about a potential incoming bear market in Bitcoin. I'm going to give you the bottom line. I do think that Bitcoin has topped long term, but we need to see a lot more action to prove it, and I'll discuss that later. I also want to explain these current narratives in the Bitcoin market that I consider dangerous. At every top of a market, you get a lot of discussion about this market's going to keep going. You get a lot of reasons why, and I'll tell you what I believe those narratives are today. Some key levels to watch closely as Bitcoin nears a potential top, or actually as develops the top that has already formed. And what I'm looking for to keep that going is probably a better way of saying that. One thing I want to talk about that, a lot of people don't seem to understand how tops form. In general, they assume that some large bears, large sellers are lurking and they want to start, jumpstart this bear market. Actually, markets tend to top when there's immense buying because everyone's piling in. As they say, when everyone and their mother is in, that's when markets top. Open auction markets in their simplest form are basically a bid and an ask. And when you have the entire buy side or bid side already in, no bid ultimately is found. And as that bid disappears, the market comes down to find buyers. That's the job of the market, facilitate trade. Market makers, who are the mechanics of that, they need to find a bid to make money. So they'll take the market down to the bid so that they can facilitate the spreads, which is how they make their money. So they facilitate the process, not to screw everyone, not to mess anybody up, but just it's simply their job to keep the market liquid. As markets trade lower, margin levels tend to break, and that's when the feedback loop ensues. And when that buying volume ultimately turns to selling volume. If you actually look at volume charts, you will see that most markets top on immense green volume. Okay, and then the red volume comes in later as the market has already started to form a top. That makes a lot of people late in terms of catching a top. Not that we have to catch a top, but to trade successfully. But I tend to trade in the middle. But what people aren't ready for it or looking for it, that's when they tend to get trapped. So markets bottom when the news is the worst. That's the top when the news is the best. I guess this is, this is, I don't know who has stated this, but this is much like Warren Buffett said, buy when everyone is fearful and sell when everyone's greedy. It's very much similar. Bitcoin bottomed in this last cycle when FTX was failing as an exchange, one of the largest exchanges at the time, ended up being a full scam. A lot of people talked about how crypto was over at that time. That's when I started buying, at least for this cycle. I mean, I started buying Bitcoin a long time ago, but for this cycle, I started buying about that time. And then when I started breaking resistance over when I was resistance that I was looking at down at those levels around 15,500, I started to buy more aggressively. So that's just generally now that we've had the other approach, lots of good news, a president that is pro-bit crypto in the United States, the freedom of crypto companies to run more freely. We've got Treasury companies buying Bitcoin. I think we have a lot of good news, right? And some of it is the best news we've heard in years for crypto. I think that's a warning when we're coming near really all-time highs. All right. So the myths that run this Bitcoin cycle, our pro-crypto administration takes the shackles off Bitcoin prices. I think it's true that it has taken the shackles off Bitcoin companies or crypto companies, having deregulated them largely. But that doesn't mean the price of Bitcoin or other cryptos has continually upward. And then the other one is the take up and supply by treasury companies and sovereign wealth funds of perpetuate Bitcoin prices. We haven't seen that many sovereign wealth funds, we have a little one forming in the United States, treasury, a treasury reserve of crypto, but mainly it's been treasury companies. And now we've seen expansion from Bitcoin to Ether to, I would call coins that, we use the coin SHIT coin. I won't say it in case there are kids at home, but those are really pretty poor projects, one of them being WorldCoin, and we're seeing treasuries form for that coin. I think there's one forming for, these treasury companies are spreading to lots of other coins, which I call low quality assets. And this is pretty good sign of a lot of froth in the market. Okay. This statement that treasury companies will continue the march upward in price, or this belief system that will continue the march upward in price, this just isn't how markets work. I mean, again, these just perpetuating buying, but as soon as the cash is run out to buy, the market will come down to find a bid and start the process of a bear market. This is just some of my work in the past. Again, this is all from Money Show. If Money Show is documented, you can go back and see some of those talks. I know some of them are videotaped. So in 2023, I was looking for a bottom in this region, which is between 15,000 and 6,000, and certainly we bought about 15,500. And then as we moved along into that bull market, you can see this yellow box on the top of my charts in the 125K region. Again, that has been there since 2021 when we had an extension and a third wave that suggested that to be a target. Incidentally, my old target for this fifth wave was 65K, but we had met it in 2021, but the pattern, the structure was not complete. And that's when I had to say, well, with this extension in the third wave, this fifth wave, and I'm talking about the circle 5 here, it must be able to reach 125K. So that's where we basically have just about touched it. I mean, again, 124,500 is close enough, you ask me. Some people may hold me to that 25K, but that is close enough to the pivot for me to consider that the top has been made. This micro isn't exactly how it all panned out. I didn't have that exactly right, but I did have this region in as support in the 2025 region or so. I think it went down to like 18 or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but we did come down into it. We bounced once, came into it again, and then took off. And so to find ourselves up as 125K. And you can check out the charts. It's at least in terms of level, I had it correct. And then very recently in the last series of my money show, you can see my chart with this blue five up here. I had it's pinned just above the pivot point, but basically I was saying in this area, have a potential top with the potential that we swing up to 124 and 140K. This level is not off the table yet. But I'm watching this. I'm watching the action, and it's certainly off the table if we break 74,500, and if we break through 95, it's a giant warning. So we've already pierced 108K. So I had this in the last presentation. That's already been pierced. It's a warning again. We're seeing a move from hitting pivots on the upside to breaking pivots on the downside, and each pivot we break is another level of confirmation. But ultimate confirmation is a break of the 74,500, which again, for me as a person that swing trades, I'm out of my Bitcoin in my swing portfolios. I'm looking for a setup to take another long if it shows, but I'm out of it. The only thing I'm holding now is that Bitcoin, which I determined to never sell unless I hit some financial difficulties. Again, that is not advice for you, but that is the way I'm playing this. If we see a setup, I'll go swing long, and I've been taking some shorts along the way as we go. So what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong about Bitcoin breaking 125K? Let's got a little typo there. So if Bitcoin sets up for a run over 125K, it should hit 140K. If you look at the yellow box on my chart, it is between 125 and 195K. And so the pivot is broad actually. So 125K is the nominal target, and hitting 140K is sort of within that target region from a long-term Fibonacci perspective. I am flatly wrong about the structure that we have in Bitcoin if we sustain a break of 195K. That's quite a ways away, right? That's like well over a double from here, or it's just slightly under a double from here. But we have to sustain under it to tell me that I'm wrong, and I'm talking about wrong about the price structure from the last 5 years. So it's a major L, so to speak. Now I would still expect a bearish cycle to start north of 200K, at least somewhere around there. Again, the market even down here at 100 and what are we 13 today, 113K. It's pretty frothy, honestly. Very frothy at 125K. So I would expect a bear market to show north of 200K, but instead of taking a deeper bear market, which can go as deep as 10K, it more likely would hold 30 to 50K instead. And I'm going to show a chart for what that looks like. And that would set up a run into a million, but we still get a chance to buy down in this region. So I still expect a bear market of sorts to start. All right, so this is, again, the long-term perspective. And so I've talked about the 125K region. It can go up to 195K. That is this black circle V. If it is sustains over 195K, that triggers the red perspective. We still get a pullback. It's not as deep. 30 to 55K would be what I expect, and then it would set up a run to a million. But if we hold under 195K, and more importantly, hold the 124,500 top that we've already struck, I expect this bear market to be quite large. It can drop as low as 10K, as low as 3K. More likely it hits 10K. This very simple structure that I have in ABC is too early to tell what structure it'll take on, but I do think it can last easily 5 to 10 years. That said, B waves in Bitcoin tend to push over all-time highs, so we still could get an all-time high in the middle of it. And if you're very familiar with Elliott Wave and the S&P 500, particularly with Avi Gilbert's work, the person that I work for at Elliott Wave Trader, he you look at his S&P charts, and from 2000 to 2009, that was in Elliott Wave terms a large bear market, but it had a large B wave rally that broke over the all-time high for the S&P 500 before it came down into the 2009 low. So that's a great example. Bitcoin does very similar as the S&P 500 in that regard. All right, so that's if I'm wrong. And I know I'm going through this pretty quickly because I started a little bit late, so I'll let it sit here a little bit so you can kind of take in take in this bear market, and then if you have questions about it, we can go on. All right. Okay, so it's just some of the sentiment warnings, and again, every time market comes into a long-term bear market, you get a lot of sentiment warnings, you get a lot of narratives. I've urged a lot of people is to learn to follow price, don't follow the stories you hear out there. We're starting to hear wild price projections for one. I've heard over the last 3 years, the last 3 months, projections for 1 million. I've heard a projection for 250,000 by end of year. A lot of projections like that. It's interesting too because Bitcoin has classically followed the 4-year cycle. I don't put too much stock in it for a lot of fundamental and technical reasons. One, markets never follow cycles to a T over a long period of time. That would be the market giving free money. If the 4-year cycle lasted for infinity, that's all we have to do, right? Is buy Bitcoin at the bottom of a 4-year cycle and sell it at the top of a 4-year cycle. I mean, very easy. Markets don't do that for very long, but so far it's done that 3 times in lockstep. And that cycle will end, at least in classic sense, around October if my research is right. And so we're coming up on that, right? We're about a week away from October, and so about mid-October is where that would start. But people are saying in this cycle that the cycle is just beginning. And even though the cycle has gone since the 2023 low, so almost, is that 2 years in? I'm trying to do my calendar anyway, 2 or 3 years. We're going into 2000, yeah, it's 3 years. So the cycle is already at the bottom is at 3 years, but the cycle with respect to halving reaches its culmination around October. And that's based on the mining halving. Again, you can read up on that if you're interested in that. All right. And then we have this, again, narrative about company treasuries and sovereign funds will power the Bitcoin prices to the moon. And that started with the company strategy. It used to be called MicroStrategy, and they started a Bitcoin fund, and that stock has done very well. The CEO, Michael Saylor, has sold that strategy to many other companies, and quite a few have started it. It's interesting because price action, both in strategy and a lot of these Bitcoin treasuries, actually started to be bearish last year. I mean, right now, MSTR struck a top in 2024. I warned my subscribers out, but potentially being its cyclical top, I think it was 700, I think, or 600. At any rate, I had warned about that potentially being the top. I have a small position in strategy in case it forms bullish action off its recent low, much smaller than I held in 2024. But right now, that price action looks pretty bad. Right now, it looks probably more accurate that top in 2024 holds. Not only that, but a lot of these treasury companies have abjectly bearish price action. Pretty interesting, right? Again, challenge me on any, and I don't have charts. I can't bring up charts for all of them, but challenge me on any thoughts. If I know the chart, I can try to discuss its price action from memory. But I am looked across the market space, and it's turning pretty bearish in these companies. Not only that, but we have Ethereum's treasury companies, and as I explained, we're starting to see them in some really strange altcoins. Pretty bad assets, if you ask me, and that is a sign of frothy action. I guess the newest treasury companies are ones with poor cash flow. I've discussed that in the previous presentation. A lot of these companies I would describe as zombie companies trying to save their companies by holding Bitcoin. I don't know. If I own a company, I want its business to be in good shape. Not only that, but it requires having a good cash flow to perpetuate this buying. So as the market turns over and as Bitcoin is down, 15% or so, those companies that have bought near the top, now they're in pretty bad shape. Their balance shape is going into bad shape. But on top of that, a lot of them have poor cash flow. It's pretty dire if it continues to perpetuate. Again, they're buying based on the long-term CAGR of Bitcoin. But the problem is they're ignoring its immense volatility. Some of these companies have a poor debt to cash flow ratio, and then they're going to need that cash flow to pay their operating expenses, even though they're trying to turn themselves into a financialized company. Some of them are trying to turn themselves almost into an ETF. They still have a company. They still have doors to keep open. Um, Now, again, we go back to what it takes for markets to top. And once the selling happens, you have holders that start to feed the feedback loop, right? These may be the companies that if these companies are in dire cash straits or in dire straits cash wise, they may have to sell their Bitcoin to keep those doors open. And I'm just speaking hypothetically, right? But if so, they will help feed the feedback loop that happens in a bear market. So it's just, I'm not saying this is what will happen, but I'm issuing this as a warning. Um, it's interesting right now, and this was hot off the press in the presentation I did for Money Show a couple weeks ago. And someone had posted on Twitter, you can check out this account. This is the MNAV of the companies. It's basically the value of the companies versus the Bitcoin or Ether or whatever Treasury asset they're holding, and they're going into negative MNAV. Now, and that means that basically they're not being valued according to the current state of the balance sheet. Okay. Now, you might say that that's a great deal. I'm going to buy that. Okay. I would say yes if on top of it you're shorting equal parts Bitcoin. And the reason is because the problem with going negative MNAV is these companies can't perpetuate the buying strategy because they have been doing it by issuing equity. How are they going to issue equity when they're going below the asset base? Generally, when companies go below their NAV, they generally buy their own stock as proper capital management, right? They don't do the opposite. So it wouldn't make any sense, and the market itself would think twice when they can just buy Bitcoin, right? It used to be that you would buy this company because they're gaining premium over the Bitcoin price. It may sound like a deal, but the problem is again, it's not a deal if they cannot perpetuate the strategy. Okay, so it's sort of there's a feedback loop happening in these negative valuations. Negative valuations, I mean, versus their book price. Okay, very interesting. All right, so again, more warnings. So my tactics, I've already reduced overall exposure to crypto space. I started doing that 50K Bitcoin actually very early. I'm starting to remove remaining exposure in altcoins. It's basically setup by setup. So various charts are still a little bit healthy in the altcoin space. I'm holding on to them. I have, as I said earlier, I have no swing long Bitcoin currently. That can easily change if I see the right setup. I'm orientating all of my swing trading accounts to both trade long and short. So it's basically being sort of nimble versus being, where I was at for the last 3 years, just mainly swinging long over and over and over. That time to me has passed. At least I need to get a little more cautious. And then Bitcoin bears are great opportunities to short, but actually the greatest opportunity of a bear market is to get a lot of cheap Bitcoin. And especially in the context of that large B wave rally that we can expect in Bitcoin, even if we're in a bear market for say 5 to 10 years, we should see a mid bear market rally, at least one, maybe even several, that allow us to really capitalize on that rally. Because there's a saying that bear market rallies are more powerful than bull market rallies, and I generally agree. Let's see. Now, what I want to do actually is just give an update on price action. So I'm going to try to skillfully move to a different program. So give me a second. And I want to share the update on the chart where we're at today. Hopefully you guys can see it. I see that you can see it. And this is a chart of Bitcoin looking at updated action. I've been tracking the move down. Let's see if we can zoom out. So here is our potential cyclical top. We've come down in what I call an A wave, at least that's what I'm calling it temporarily. And I marked this B wave resistance recently. We have bounced right off of it so far. What's interesting today is I'm at a pivot. You can see we poked over this red pivot. I'll zoom in so you guys can see it. And this is opening the door potential. Right now I can't say for sure, but it's opening a door potential for this B wave to grow. And so we may actually track back to 120. So I'm watching this very closely. So let me just say this, if you guys are watching this presentation and you see us track back to 120, don't imagine that I'm thinking I'm wrong. This also could break over a new all-time high and still be a B wave. So just, and another thing I want to say is that often when your target misses, and I'm talking about 125K just barely, sometimes a B wave actually stretches to accomplish what we call the impulse fail to do. So that'll be interesting as well. So that's what I'm watching now, seeing if this move develops into a larger rally back to 125 or at least to 122, which would be where it would target at a minimum, or if we start to fail in here in the next couple days and start the continued slide, which the next ultimate target is 95K for this setup if it continues. So that's what I'm watching right now. Again, like I said, no position. If I see this develop, I may actually take a very brief long position to trade back to 122K. Again, like I said, I'm a very nimble trader. If you're more of a long-term person, you want to be a lot more careful than what I'm doing here. But I've been in trading these markets for quite a long time now. All right, that's what I wanted to share. I can get to Q&A. I know I spoke really fast. I apologize. I came in a little bit late, and I wanted to make sure I started a good rhythm. I'll get us back um, to the QR code so you guys can snap that. Hang on a second. Trying to find a presentation again. Hang on a second. I apologize. I'm fumbling a bit. There we go. All right. Okay. Any questions?
Uh, do you have a couple questions here?
Yep.
One of them you may have already answered it. It was asked early on in the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
He's asking, when do you think is the next crypto winter?
I think it has already started, although, yeah, I mean, I think I'm essentially answering as long as we hold 124,500, it has started already. But that said, the move from a bull to a bear market is a transition, and so I still am seeing some bullish charts in altcoins, so that winter may not be widespread for a bit. Okay, so
Okay.
I believe the transition to that winter has already started.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan.
Mhm.
Another question is, what do you think about shorting MSTR using SMST?
I don't trade. I assume that's a leverage fund. I don't trade leverage funds because I don't like the way they're constructed. I trade them very briefly at times, but they are very poorly designed asset class. The way I short things is via put options. I tend not to short shares either. So that's a personal preference. Again, there's a whole mathematical and academic discussion to explain why a leverage ETF is a hunk of junk. So I'd
Okay.
be careful with them. I assume that's what that is because I don't memorize all the leverage funds out there. I'm a put option guy.
Okay.
You do what you want to do. It can work for sure if the market stays bearish. I'm not fully bearish on MSTR yet. It looks like it topped, but I need to see a little bit more structure, a lot like in Bitcoin. I still need to see a lot more structure in Bitcoin to prove that I'm right.
Okay. Another question is, what BTC number do you need to see for a swing back to 122K?
It's not so simple. It's mainly structure. I look at the market structurally. It's not a level. You can, we can break over 122 directly and top right there, right? So like I couldn't give you a level. It really, it's all about when you have a bullish trend, you see markets pull back and hold support levels is basically it. So it's how it develops. And so if say it hit 122 and then it held support level, then I would be looking for 125. We could set up down here with a clear setup, which is hard for me to describe because it can happen multiple ways. That I was like, well, this setup it points us right down from here, say around 115K. Let's say if we rally to 117, pull back to 115. I'm just making things up. Then it could aim us to 125. So there's a lot of different ways that a bullish setup develops. I'm not seeing it right now, but it's not so easy as calling a level. A lot of people want like, oh, what's the level? Where's the level? I can just buy that breakout level and we'll just go. I'm actually the opposite type of trader. I like markets challenge breakout levels, then pull back, pull into the inside of the range, so to speak, if you know what I'm talking about, and then take it on a low price so that I have low risk, right? So that's basically it's hard to explain when we don't have it in front of us. We just don't. We don't have a setup for 125K.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Um, one more question is, do you see Bitcoin continuing to decouple from other risk assets, or will equity markets still heavily influence its direction?
I actually will battle a notion that equity markets actually do. Do. So quite the principle here, I actually disagree with. So uh, am I saying Bitcoin is fully decoupled? No. Risk assets move together. Like for example, when margin calls happen in a system of financial markets, they happen across the board. You can see gold is largely uncorrelated uh, to the equity markets. All of a sudden become correlated when margin happens, and a lot of times you see that in Bitcoin. So am I saying Bitcoin's uncorrelated? No. I'm just saying the principle or notion that equity markets influence Bitcoin. I actually, most people tell me it's the other way around, that Bitcoin pulls the equity markets with it. I mean, to me, both statements are false. They're not, they doesn't operate that way. Each market is on its own, except they can rhyme for certain periods of time.
Okay.
Correlation comes and goes.
All
So,
right. Thank you, Ryan.
yep.
I think that wraps up our questions, and we actually are out of time. As
All
always, it's
right.
a
Hey,
pleasure having you.
appreciate everyone. I'm sorry I came in a little bit late, or I think I came in on time, but I had to run to get here, and so I rushed a bit. So if any questions, I would just say you can catch me with the left QR code live if you want to come on the service for a bit. I don't have a problem if you just want to try it and vacate. No worries. You can also see me on Twitter, which is R Wilday, RWILDAY. So interact with me. And by the way, I call a monthly public webinar. And then again, check out the presentation with the right QR if you want it. I haven't put it up yet, so give me a chance to do that. And there you go.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.